welcome back to the Strawberries and Cream blanket. We are on our final section that we need to learn today, section 6. It's nice and quick and easy, but if you haven't done any of the other sections before, then do pop back and find the videos for those. And then when you're ready, we'll work section 6 together. If you haven't met me before, I'm Hannah from Afghan Crochet, and I'm delighted to meet you and work on this blanket with you. We are running a crochet along in July 2022, but if it's not that time anymore, then please don't worry. I'll put links in the description for where you can find the free version of the pattern, where you can purchase a PDF to download, and where you can also purchase the entire thing as a course. So have a little look down below, see which option suits you best, and let's get going. So here we are, having done section 5 and then our intersection rows here, and we're ready to do the last part that we need to learn for the blanket, which is section 6 here. And you see it's just a little diddy one. It's only 5 rows, I believe. Yeah, it's only 5 rows, and that will sit at the center of your blanket. And I don't know if I explained this actually at the beginning. I think I may have done, but the reason I've done a small skinny panel. This is obviously a lot smaller than your blanket will be. I've done a skinny panel because I wanted it to fit nicely in the frame for the filming so that you could see either end. And I've also only gone up to halfway, because once you've done halfway, I'll show you in a moment that you'll know exactly what you need to do for the other half of the blanket, because you're going to repeat it symmetrically all the way up to the top of the blanket before we then put the border around the whole thing. So before we get ahead of ourselves, let's crack on and let's do section 6, and then you'll know everything you need to know apart from the border to make the entire blanket. For this section, you are going to need your yarn colours E and C. So here we are, E and C there. So go grab those and we're ready. Okay, so to begin section 6, we're going to join yarn E at the end of our intersection part. And I know it's tricky because it's a very similar colour there, isn't it? So sorry if that's tricky to see, but you already know what to do here because it's really similar to the beginning of section 5. So we turn our work ready to work the next row, which in the pattern is row 81, if you're following along. And all we're going to do is we're going to chain 1, and then we are going to work a UK double crochet or a US single crochet in each stitch along. So nice and straightforward, nice and easy way to get ourselves into it. And you'll remember that this is the very same way that we began section 5. So and you'll see as we go that actually it's very similar to section 5. We just have different amounts of skipped and worked stitches, and also we do something quite fancy with this colour of yarn towards the end to make this lovely long spike stitch. So just work away all the way along this row. And I think I'm getting excited now because I know that we are now nearly halfway through the blanket. I don't know about you, but I get excited when I know I'm halfway through, because then I know I've only got that much to go again. But then also I get a bit sad because I'm like, oh, it'll be over. And when you're really enjoying a project, it's kind of like, oh, you want to make it last. However, that means you get to pick something new to make next. And hopefully this will give you all the inspiration and stuff to try out things with colorwork, try out different stitches. My whole aim with Afghan Crochet at the moment is to help support people find that they can do techniques that they perhaps thought they couldn't, you know, to kind of break down those barriers of saying, oh, it's too hard, I can't do that, it's too complicated for me, I'm only a beginner, all of those types of things. It really doesn't matter how much experience you have, as long as you keep going and keep trying. It will click, I promise. So here we are at the end of the row, and I've waffled for the entire row. And all we're going to do is break our yarn, because we're going to change to yarn C. And there we are, ready to turn and start row 82. And what we're going to do, as you remember, we did on section 5, we did a chain 4, and that counts as a stitch and a chain then, doesn't it? And so we're now going to skip 1 stitch, and we're going to treble crochet, a UK treble or a US double crochet in the next 2 stitches. So we're skipping this next one, and then we're working a stitch into the next 2. And then we're going to repeat that process. We're going to chain 1, we're going to skip 1, and then we're going to treble in the next 2. So a UK treble, a US double crochet. And so you know how to do this because you've done it down here. It's exactly the same. So chain 1 there, skip 1, and work a stitch into the next 2. And now we work our way along. That's the end of our stitch repeat there. We're going to work our stitches in the next 2. And then we'll chain 1 and we skip 1. And we carry on until we get to the last stitch. And you remember then we just pop a stitch into the last one and it completes the row for us. And here we are coming towards the end of the row. We've done our chain 1 and we're skipping 1, and then we're going to work a stitch into that very last one. And then we'll be changing colour at the end of the row. So no yarn over and complete your stitch. We need to snip our yarn and then get our next colour ready. So back to our other colour. And we join and we turn ready for the next row. So this is now going to be row 83. So now row 83 might feel like a very peculiar one, and I absolutely understand if you think it is, but as we go along I promise it will make sense. So what we are going to do, we're going to have a really short row here, short as in height, and we're only going to be working UK double crochet or US single crochet in this row. So we've chained 1 and we're going to pop a stitch into that first one there, and then we're just going to basically copy what's underneath us but using this shorter stitch. So you're only going to use a UK double crochet or a US single crochet. You're going to chain 1 and then look, by mistake I've gone over already. We need to then pop that short stitch into each stitch that we come across. And then you're going to chain 1 and skip 1. So you're going to chain 1 and skip 1 over the top of every chain that you have from the row below, and then you're going to pop a stitch into every stitch that you have from the stitch below. So we chain 1, we skip 1, we work 2 stitches, we chain 1, we skip 1, and then you follow along all the way to the end of the row like that. Here we are at the end. We've chained 1, we've skipped 1, and so just be careful on this one because it is our chain 4 that we had from the row below. So you need to not do it into the first chain that you come across, but pop your stitch into the next one, which will be the 1, 2, the 3, third one there. And then we're not doing that, Hannah. We're not finishing our stitch. We're going to break our yarn and we're going to change our colour ready for the next row. And so here we are at the beginning of row 84, and it's going to be an exact copy of row 82. So 2 rows below in exactly the same colour. So we begin with a chain 4, and then we skip 1, and then we work into the next 2. And we're working the taller stitches, so the UK treble or a US double crochet here. And then we chain 1 and we skip 1. And so you'll see it works in exactly the same way. We're going to copy our stitch pattern that we have here. So anywhere you have a chain, you're going to chain 1 and skip 1. And anywhere where you have stitches, you're going to pop a stitch into them. And then when we get to the end, you remember we pop a stitch in the very last one. And then we'll change colour again to work the final row of this section. Here we are at the end. And we pop a stitch into that last one. And then we change colour, ready for the next row. Okay then, so row 85, we're going to begin by chaining 1, and then we're going to use a couple of different stitches in this row. We're going to begin with a double crochet, so a UK double crochet, a US single crochet in that first stitch there. And then you see we come across our chain spaces, and we've got lots of them in a row here, haven't we? And what we're going to do is we're going to aim right down here. We've never worked quite that far down before. We're going to aim right down here to this stitch that you've skipped in back in row 81, yeah, back in row 81, and we're going to go for all the way down there. So this is where it's really important to keep your sort of height of the row correct, because what you're going to do is basically it's going to crumple over as you pop through and then grab your yarn from the back, and you need to pull it all the way up to make sure that it's not going to affect like how your fabric sits. And that is a lovely, great big long sort of spiked stitch there. And that sits over the top of those chain spaces. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to work short stitches. So we're going to work a UK double crochet, US single crochet in the next 5. So make sure that you scoot that stitch over so you find that very first one there that I have. And then that's 2, and then you'll see the third is into a chain space. So we do leave some of these chain spaces. And that's 3, 4, and then 5. And then we do that great big long stitch into the next one. So we're aiming right down here into row 81 again. And we scoop it and we make sure it meets the height of the row that we're working. And then we do the short stitches into the next 5. And then we're ready for that long stitch down here again. And then we go short stitches into 5. And off we go again, right down there. And then 5. Just done another long stitch and we've come to the last 4 stitches. So these 2 obvious stitches here and then our chain 4 from the row below, which is a chain 1 and then a stitch. So we've got 4 that we're going to work the shorter stitches into. And that is that row complete. And that is also section 6 complete. Now, the next thing we need to do is to work the intersection pattern at the top of here. So another 2 rows of that. And then when you've done that, pop back here and we will chat through how we then work the rest of the blanket on the top side, as it were, how we keep going to make it nice and symmetrical. So you should be feeling absolutely thrilled with yourself because you have learned all of these colour work techniques. And now you know exactly what to do for the other half of the pattern. So once you have got to this point, so at the end of section 6, as I said, you need to work the intersection pattern here. And then as you'll see in the pattern, it then just repeats each section. So section 5 will come again next. And then section 4 will come again next over the top of that. Section 3 will come over the top of that. Section 2, and then finally section 1. Now the important thing that you will need to remember is to check in the pattern because the colour sequencing does change, so things are flipped the other way because we want to begin the next repeat of this section, for example, with this colour. We want it to be a symmetrical version of the blanket, but if you don't want to do that, then that's absolutely fine. Just go in whichever colour order that you would like to do. The only thing that I would say, and I don't know if I've mentioned it yet, is that I have made sure that every single colour that we have in the palette is used in this bottom section, and then obviously therefore the top section of the blanket. And then each colour comes once in the panels. in a section. So we have 12 colours, we have 6 panels, and they're all used somewhere within it to try and distribute the yarn evenly and stop you from having to buy loads and loads of different colour yarns. So if you are going to switch up your colours and use more in one section than another, then just think very carefully as to whether you think you might have enough for it. So that's one top tip there. So I would go ahead, follow the rest of the pattern by repeating the sections that you already know, and then the important thing to do next, I would say, is to weave in your ends like I have for this panel here. And as you see, we have slightly bowed edges with a couple of the panels, not many, but with a couple of them. So I would block it at this point. I would block, and this will pull out very nicely to meet the size of this panel. In fact, that one's the only one that's really bowing out at the sides, and that's because of the stitches that we've used. We've crammed more stitches into this space, or there is a denser stitch, I think is the best way of saying it, rather than completely lined up stitches as in the rest of them. So I would block it lightly, and the way that you can do that is you can buy fancy blocking mats and fancy pins and all that kind of stuff, or you can just pin it out on a bed with any kind of pins that you've got. And I would, depending on the fibre that you're using, if you're using an acrylic yarn like this, then you're fine to spray it, get it wet, all that kind of stuff. If you're using something more delicate, then I would just be more delicate with it. And also it depends whether it's near the correct measurements or not, whether it sits nicely, whether you need to pull it too far out or not. So just see how it is and see how it goes. And there is an entire section in the pattern, the written pattern, about blocking. So go and have a good read of that and see what you'd like to do with it. Once your ends are all weaved in and you've given it a little block in however you'd like to do it, then we are ready to add the border.